All right, so GPT-5 is finally here, and man, the hype is real. But let's get past the headlines. What's actually different under the hood? In this breakdown, we're going to tear apart the official tech notes to see what makes this thing tick, to understand the core innovations that make this model a genuine leap forward.
And OpenAI is not pulling any punches here. They're calling it their smartest, fastest, most useful model yet, promising expert-level intelligence for everyone. That's a pretty big claim, right? But as we're about to see, they've actually brought the receipts to back it up.
Okay, so what is the secret sauce here? How did they pull off this massive jump in performance, efficiency, and even honesty? Well, the answer isn't just about making the model bigger. It's about a fundamentally smarter design. So, the first big piece of the puzzle is the architecture. See, GPT-5 isn't just one giant model anymore. It's a unified system with three core parts: a super efficient base model, a really deep reasoning model, and a kind of traffic controller that decides who gets the job. Let's see how that works. And that traffic controller, the real-time router, is the real hero here. Think of it like a triage nurse in an emergency room. When you send in a prompt, this router takes a split-second look and figures out how hard it is. Simple question, boom, it goes to the quick, efficient model for a fast answer. But a really tricky problem that needs some serious thought, that gets sent over to the heavy-duty thinking model. And that's the whole secret right there. That's how it's both powerful and efficient.
Okay, so a new architecture sounds cool, but how do we know it actually works? Well, you look at the data. You look at the benchmarks. So let's dive into the numbers and see how this new system actually stacks up on some tough academic and real-world tests.
And wow, these numbers really show you just how broad its skills are. This is not a one-trick pony. We're seeing brand new, state-of-the-art, what we call SOTA scores pretty much everywhere you look, from math and coding to understanding images and tackling complex health questions. Let's zoom in on a couple of these because they're pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, first up, just look at this jump in math and reasoning. The AME, this is a seriously difficult high school math competition. It's no joke. And getting a 94.6% on it without using any external tools, that's just a huge, huge deal. This tells you it's not just a fancy calculator. It's actually demonstrating a much deeper, more abstract ability to reason.
And then you see pretty much the same story over in coding. This is on SW Bench, which isn't some theoretical test. It's about solving real-world coding problems straight from GitHub, and it's nailing almost 75% of them. So if you're a developer, what this means is the model's getting way better at the tough stuff, like complex debugging or even spinning up really nice-looking front-end code from just one prompt.
So here's the kicker, right? GPT-5 is not just smarter, it's also way leaner. It's hitting all these new records while using somewhere between 50 and 80% fewer tokens than the last model. Think about that. That's a massive win for efficiency. It means quicker answers and lower bills for everyone using the API. But performance isn't just about crushing benchmarks. For an AI to be actually useful in the real world, you have to be able to trust it. It has to be reliable. And that brings us to the next huge improvement here. A big shift away from making stuff up, hallucinations, towards real, verifiable honesty.
This next example really shows you the kind of depth we're talking about now. So the prompt was pretty simple. Write about a widow in Kyoto who finds her late husband's socks. Now, the GPT-4o version was fine. It was okay. But just listen to the imagery GPT-5 comes up with. It describes the socks as black flags of a country that no longer exists. That one line, that one metaphor, it just shows a level of literary and emotional depth that is on a completely different planet.
Okay, but this next one. This is where things get really, really interesting when we talk about reliability. The model was asked to do something it physically can't do in its little sandbox. Basically, mess with a system file to turn on Wi-Fi. The old model? It just straight up lies and says, yep, done. But look at GPT-5. It knows it can't do that. And instead of lying, it just tells you, hey, I can't access that system file because of my environment. It's honest about its limitations. That is a huge step forward for building trust.
And this isn't just a one-off example. You can actually measure this leap in honesty. When GPT-5 kicks into that deep thinking mode for the hard questions, it makes about 80% fewer factual errors, 80% fewer hallucinations than the last generation. If you're using AI for research, for facts, for anything where the truth matters, that's a total game changer.
So all this talk about reliability and honesty, it naturally leads us to safety. And with GPT-5, it looks like OpenAI is really rethinking their whole approach. They're moving away from a simple, yes or no model of safety.
They're calling this new paradigm safe completions. And the whole idea is to teach the model to be as helpful as it possibly can be while still staying inside the safety guardrails. So instead of just saying, nope, can't help you, to a borderline request, it might give you a partial answer or a high-level answer, or it might just clearly explain why it can't give you the full details.
Yeah, the old way was pretty rigid, right? It was this binary choice, either comply or refuse. And that just didn't work well for tricky areas like biology or chemistry. But this new safe completions idea gives it a much more nuanced toolkit. It can navigate those gray areas with more intelligence, which in the end actually makes it a lot more helpful without being unsafe.
All right, finally, for all of you out there who really need to push AI reasoning to its absolute limits, there's another level. Let's talk about what GPT-5 Pro brings to the table for that super demanding, expert-level work.
So GPT-5 Pro is basically that deep thinking model we talked about, but, supercharged. And the stats really speak for themselves here. Experts prefer it over the standard model by a 2-to-1 margin. It makes 22% fewer major mistakes. And it sets a whole new record on the GBQA benchmark, which is full of ridiculously hard science questions. This is the one you bring out for the really, really hard problems.
So, to wrap it all up, we've got a much smarter architecture, we've seen a massive leap in performance across the board, and, maybe most importantly, a fundamental shift towards an AI that's just more honest. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Now that we have a tool that can reason more like an expert, a tool that actually knows its own limits, what are the really big, meaningful challenges we should be pointing it at next?